All set? I'll take that as a yes. Jesus.
2016.
This episode of Idle Thumbs is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is the fastest, easiest, most professional, user-friendly, and responsive way to make your very own website, portfolio, blog, or online store. Start your free trial today at squarespace.com and use the offer code THUMBS to get 10% off your first purchase. Sign up for a year, get that domain name. That is squarespace.com with the offer code THUMBS.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Nick.
Me too.
Wake up.
Wake the fuck up. It's time for a podcast.
It's December 29th, 2016.
This is Idle Thumbs 295. You've had an entire year to get used to what year it is.
I overthought it.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm Chris Remo.
I'm Nick Breckon.
I'm Jake Rodkin. I overthought it.
Man, only 2 more days until this year is over. I guess 3 more days, but yeah.
Well, we're recording this
It's 3 more days until
a
this
week
year's
in the
over, Chris.
past,
No.
so we have like
No.
10 days until this year's over. So
Don't
we're
tell
actually
anyone, don't tell anyone.
We're in a much more miserable position than those of you listening to this podcast who have many fewer days until the end of the year. Not that 2017 is probably going to be much better. Let's be honest.
It's all relative,
It's-
right?
yeah.
But
At least we can declare 2016 over.
yeah.
I don't know. That's cold comfort, I suppose.
We're recording this a week in advance, so for all we know, we're not even around to hear this recording.
That's true.
That's true.
That's
Who knows what
entirely
could have
true.
happened?
Yeah.
No
between
human
this
will ever hear this recording.
between the recording of this and the release of it. Well, this is probably going to be a short-ish episode and a very reader mail dominated episode. But I wanted to start this episode by hearing Nick Breckon's experience returning to Diablo 1 with your girlfriend Janelle. You guys played cooperatively.
Yeah.
And I didn't watch much of the stream, but you opened the stream with your kind of recollected belief that Diablo 1 is the kind of most focused and coherent game in the Diablo series.
Yeah.
Not to say it's necessarily the best game, right? I mean, it's a very janky game, certainly compared to Diablo 2, which I think most people would call the classic of the series.
Yeah, for sure.
I probably would.
Yeah.
But I totally agree with you. I think tonally, Diablo 1 is, at least in my memory.
That's the thing. Yeah.
So is that?
That was my memory of it, right?
But
no. There's no but.
Oh.
Well, I'm trying to give you butts, but
Okay.
I don't.
I'll take your
I don't have
butts.
any butt. I got no butts.
But
no,
especially if they're on a coffee cup.
Right.
McDonald's, by the way, seems to have very quickly recalled their butt cup. Because
Really?
within days after everyone on the internet saw it, and
that's too bad.
they're just classic cups are back.
they're old classic non-holiday cups. No warmest greetings.
So the warmest greetings is a collector's item now. I mean, that's like
Yeah, I guess I already threw mine away.
Oh man,
Yeah.
you missed out on
Surely
a
someone,
gross,
surely some internet
rancid
person
coffee
went to
cup.
McDonald's and just ordered a shitloads of coffees.
Oh yeah.
And that person runs the Smithsonian.
Library of Congress.
Right.
We must categorize these butts.
Every McDonald's coffee cup is sent to the Library of Congress.
Yeah.
2 of every one, so that one of them can be defaced amusingly.
So your butts, your Diablo.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Diablo butts.
man. So first of all, playing this game in 2016 is really difficult. Like,
because of just your constant state of anxiety and ennui and whatever else that gets
right?
in the way.
Yeah, I know it's hard to stay focused on the game when the fire is burning outside your window. But no. It's really old in a surprising way. Blizzard does not.
It's actually 20 years old as of this year.
Yeah,
right?
Blizzard does not even have this game on their site. You can't buy this game from Blizzard.
Which is unusual
kind of
for
crazy.
Blizzard.
Yeah, it's very strange. The latest patch, if you apply the latest patch, it still doesn't run on a Windows 10 machine. So there's some doing there.
Did you have to run it in DOSBox or something?
No.
Okay.
There's some fan patches that have been created that are just sort of barely out there. You have to dig pretty far to find them. But then, because we wanted to play it multiplayer,
Oh, geez.
we went, all right, well, let's try connecting to Battle.net. One, if you have the fan patch installed, Battle.net flags you as a cheater.
Wait, so if you don't, Battle.net still works for Diablo 1?
Yeah, it does. It's crazy.
What?
The styling and everything is the same. So it's the crazy cyberpunk, like, welcome to Battle.net,
they
the
just
green
have a
font,
fucking,
like the Matrix font. And
they
like
have like a Pentium 2 in a box somewhere running the old
Basically-
running Diablo 1. Diablo?
Diablo.
Mario? What about that Mario? That Diablo?
Gotta build
running
some more
Diablo.
zealots. Yeah.
By the way, that's what it's going to be like 20 years from now, trying to play Super Mario Run.
Except it
Oh,
just
yeah.
won't
Because
work.
it's all server driven. It just
Oh,
won't
work.
It'll be the iOS
Nintendo
10
won't maintain
emulator.
that like Blizzard has.
But yeah, no, it's weird. You go on there and they have ads for like Heroes of the Storm, but it's like, you know, a 16 color GIF just at the top of.
You can say
at the
GIF,
top
Nick, you
of,
can say it right.
I wanted to say
Son
GIF.
of a
I
bitch.
figured I was in the minority.
Not here, you're not.
Well, that's okay. That's
In
that's
this
probably
room,
true.
GIFs rule appropriately,
Yeah.
and they promote games.
Yeah, I feel like I've lost the war on GIFs. Every time I say GIF, somebody says it's GIF, and so I've just given up, and my
Right.
brain is now
That's
just
like me with my last
ceded
name.
that territory. Yeah, really?
Yeah.
Everyone says
Weird.
Remo, and you're
Yeah,
like,
now I
I'm,
just say it.
Man, you know what a weird thing happened last night? I was doing some like thing. What was I? I was on a site that wanted to create an account for me, and I can't remember what it was. It was something completely benign, though. It was not like applying for a passport or something. It was just something that just wanted to do a background check on me for security purposes. And they did one of those things where they
2016?
then they pulled like 5 pieces of information about me, and they were testing me. Like, have you ever lived in this address? Like,
Oh, yeah.
And one of the questions was, which of these people have you ever associated with? And on the list was Christopher Remo. And I was like, what the fuck is going on with this stupid shit?
I've never gotten that question.
It was. Oh, I know what it was. It was for FedEx. I was making a FedEx account so I could just sign up and
because
see.
you guys shared an address, probably. You guys probably both had FedEx
I guess
stuff
so.
delivered.
That
to the
must
same
be
house.
it. But it was still. It freaked me out. I was like, why does FedEx
or they just
know
paid
this?
for access to the fucking Facebook social graph, and they just have that
Yeah.
information. I mean, or
That's
however
true.
the fuck that works.
This like 5-question background check is a thing that I've gone through that on FedEx, but also like numerous other websites just have that now.
Yeah.
Websites that deal, I guess, with like sensitive information
ad
or delivery.
Yeah.
No, not even. Well,
I mean, it's probably also just used for that.
well, yeah, sure, but I mean, ones that make you proactively answer them tend to be things like delivery service, financial services, things like that.
Yeah.
It is always very weird.
It was very
how much
jarring.
information. I mean,
Yeah.
it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. But
No,
it's still
no.
weird. It's still
Yeah.
weird.
But it was very.
I haven't
strange.
gotten the associated with.
Oh, yeah.
I've
No, that
actually
was-
tried to set up a FedEx account a bunch of times, and it always fails, even though
Yeah,
it
it's not
acknowledges
good.
that I got the information correct, but it's
Right.
like there's some other reason we can't give this to you. It's
Yeah.
infuriating.
We have
denied you for
on your
your,
file. You've associated with Nick Breckon. Therefore,
Nick Breckon separately indicated he's associated with you.
Right.
Therefore, you have
your
now-
account has a flag, sir. It seems like there's a flag. So anyway, once you navigated this, you closed all those frames,
Right, I
and
got-
closed
I
all
got
those
on that
JavaScript
Battle.net.
pop-ups on Battle.net.
So Battle.net still functions as the original Battle.net.
So wait,
I
so-
was in USA 1 chat room with one other guy
Oh man.
for the original Diablo.
So did you have to strip all the patches out to get this to work, or did you?
Well, yeah. So that's what I did at first. I was like, well, I guess I'll just try not using the fan patch and just see how far I get. And so I went on a Battle.net and tried making a game. And God, the craziest thing, I spent a half an hour trying to solve a problem I was creating a game on Battle.net and then trying to join it from a computer that's on the same network, and it was every time saying that the game was too the latency was too high.
The latency in Diablo?
Yeah, on Diablo.
Did you make a GIF of the high Diablo latency?
But so here's the thing. While I was trying to problem solve this thing, I realized that this is a problem that I, like 20 years ago, had trying to do the exact same thing, and I was just having crazy
With
weird
the same person, Janelle.
Anyway, so I had to throw the Battle.net idea out the window. There were 90 people playing Diablo 1 at the time
In the world.
which is crazy
Or
to
on
think
your
about.
US server.
Yeah, I guess probably on that server. There are 4 servers in the world. So
Okay.
there's the USA, East, and
Sure.
West.
So
and
let's
then
say there's
Asia,
like
and
360 people
probably.
playing.
Yeah. So nobody's playing this game. So then I realized, well, the only other option, unless I want to do like null modem bullshit, is to try IPX, which I learned as of Windows 10 is no longer a protocol that is supported at all by Windows. You can't even like go into the system, like deep into the system settings and like enable a network to be IPX. So
I still to this day don't even really know what IPX is.
I don't either, and I spent 2 hours figuring this shit out. Anyway, so I got.
Did you have to like emulate IPX?
Yeah, there's some guy who has created an IPX wrapper that will enable IPX multiplayer for games like StarCraft and Diablo, and then also
I played the original
like,
Tribes over IPX.
Yeah, there are a couple. There's a list of about 20 games that this wrapper now enables, which is really good. And it works. And after like 4 hours of running through all this bullshit, I finally loaded up Diablo and it fucking worked. And I was really, really happy.
Nice.
And
So
that stupid town music came up, and I was like, "Oh my god, Jesus!"
Don't call it stupid.
It's the best
Matt
track ever.
Ullman's
It's stupid
Tristram
because it's
theme.
stupidly good. It's just it's unstoppable.
Did you guys stream both? Like, how did you?
Man, well, that's the other component to this is that I had to set up a stream where I had Skyped in Janelle on her webcam onto my machine. And so we had both of our faces in each bottom corner, and then.
But you didn't have both of your screens running.
No, not both of our screens. It's technically possible, but I felt like it's probably gross. I don't even know how you do that. Like like a split screen. On a wide. I mean,
maybe like a camera that procedurally cuts.
Really line up.
Yeah. So I didn't attempt that, but no, the Skype thing actually worked really well. So anyway, I was playing Diablo, and the one thing that I really want to say about Diablo, which is actually in light of recent Diablo news, because there was an article written recently, and I wish I actually had it queued up and I could point people to it, but about the history of Diablo. I think it was in Polygon, and the thing that was sort of revealed, which I didn't know until I read this thing, was that Diablo at a certain point was being designed as a turn-based game.
Oh, this must have been based on David Brevik's GDC talk.
That's what it is.
I attended that at GDC last year, and it was an amazing talk.
Yeah, okay. So I had not, watched any Diablo or played any Diablo since that talk, right? So while I was playing this game, and I remembered that information, and in light of that, I think because that decision had been made so recently in the sort of process of making
that
Diablo
game was developed
games,
in a not as long as. I mean, Diablo 2 took a lot longer to develop than Diablo 1 did.
So the thing that I noticed while playing it, just right off the bat, was how slow it is in comparison to other Diablo games. There's no run. You're always sort of walking quickly, which is hilarious. It looks hilarious. You're this big warrior with your sword out and your shield up, and you're just sort of tip-tapping your way through dungeons. But you just immediately you realize that like it's forcing you into decisions that are so much more interesting than you ever encounter in another Diablo game, because the plotting nature of this, and also the way that doors function in Diablo games, where you have to open the door, but sometimes you can't see all the way through, and the combat is much more brutal in Diablo 1 just by nature of it being kind of a more older hardcore RPG. And so I was playing with Janelle, and I knew we were going to have a hard time because she's never played an older Diablo game, really. But man, like, you have to play almost like you play a Dark Souls game. Like, I actually drew in my brain, I was like, oh man, this is the sort of, top-down 2D version of a Dark Souls game.
It's a never go for it situation.
You can't go for it. If you go for it, because of the movement speed and because of the way that this game was designed as a turn-based thing, you can get cut off by enemies in a way. Like, you can basically, you start to look at the room almost like an XCOM game, and it's so much more interesting than what, like, if you load up Diablo 3 now, it's just basically like blowing shit up and like
forever.
shit's just going everywhere and spells are flying. But with Diablo 1, you have to actually sit there, and I after a while, I would just start to talk to Janelle like I would talk to somebody playing a tactical game or something. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go through this door.
Okay, fuck you, you're fucking it up. Jesus, fucking fuck. Can you just fucking play?
Oh yeah. There's a little bit of that, to be sure. But yeah, no, that was the big takeaway for me, was that you could clearly see that at some point this game was being designed with a different intention, but then when they made it real time, there was still the vestige of all that, of considered slow plotting stuff. And I actually think that probably is a stronger core than where it is now, which is this very fast, like, I don't know, for lack of a better word, visceral. That's the fucking buzzword that they were using for Diablo 3, and it's true. It's just bodies flying everywhere and just nonstop action. I think I actually prefer Diablo 1 to all that stuff, and it's interesting.
Well, now
to
that
go
the
back
moment
and,
for that is sort of back, right? I mean,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Blizzard will probably never make that game again just because of what Blizzard is.
Oh, someone could make a Diablo 1
but someone could totally make that. Yeah, when you
Just
think
like-
about the eras the Diablo games were born into, Diablo 1 was born into an era sort of when PC gaming was still its own separate thing that had a little bit of overlap with console gaming, but it was those were essentially two different worlds of people, right? For the most part. Obviously, there are exceptions. And Diablo 1 makes sense in that context. And then Diablo 2 came out in 2000, which was sort of at the beginning of the period of time when like any mainstream game all started just filtering into like selling to basically the same category of person. It still we weren't quite in that era yet, but like we were getting there, and Diablo 2 was definitely the like much more polished playable thing.
Yeah.
And by the time Diablo 3 comes out, we are deep into the era where it's like if you're making a mainstream game, you want it to be on any possible platform, be played by like basically any possible category of game person, which, you know, has its positives, but also kind of
Well, even Diablo
the
3...
traditional wisdom dictates it locks out games like Diablo 1. But now we're also in an era where in a post-Demon Souls, Dark Souls world, where you can make a game that isn't going to sell 10 million like Diablo 2 did. And I think like the Diablo 3 somehow is like...
Well, Diablo 3 1.0 is very different than Diablo 3 modern one, which I think even pushed Diablo 3 even farther in the direction that you're saying.
Right. Well, you know what'll be interesting is they're doing a January update to Diablo 3 that is basically just like a Diablo 3's take on Diablo 1. Like they're going in.
Really?
Oh, you didn't hear about this?
No.
Oh yeah. They're. It's not a remake in the strictest sense,
Sure,
right?
of
But
course.
it's just like.
Are they finally turning the colors back to what they should be? Remember
No.
when that was a thing?
Oh, God.
You know what's funny? Like, and I was even thinking about that.
Sorry, I distracted you, Nick.
Well, no, it's true. Here's the thing, though. Like, the color issue is not really the the line of attack that I would take with that. But I think that there's a kernel of truth to all of that stuff when that Diablo 3 was announced and screenshots were released. It's not so much the aesthetic choices. It's more that in Diablo 1, it's very clear that just basic like lighting is really important to the gameplay. Like the fact that you can't clearly see into another room, or the fact that even just like right in front of you, an enemy might blend in the dark and come out and surprise you is actually like it's a serious problem while you're playing that game, and it makes it good. It makes it much more tense of an experience. And I don't think that it's necessarily like the rainbows and stuff, but like when you go back
Diablo
and look at these
2
old,
was already
Diablo 2 had already
basically,
done that. But if you go back to Diablo 1 though, and realize that it's actually, again, it's another thing that reminds me of Dark Souls in a sense, where there are levels in Dark Souls that are like you can turn the gamma up and basically cheat.
Yeah.
But if you play it correctly, it's super dark and scary and weird, and you have to like be very careful. And I don't know, there are design elements that I think it would be interesting, for people to go back and look at this stuff.
It's really good to get your specific perspective on this, having just played it, because I also have spent years kind of just with this like generalized, like, God, I remember Diablo 1 just being so intense and sort of tonally strong, but I don't know if I necessarily could, but I think the stuff I would have probably said to back that up were things that I think are still true, but are only a percentage of what makes the whole thing true, which is like, well, you know, it has that sort of Resident Evil older game is just harder to play thing, which makes it more tense, which is true, but also isn't really something you can intentionally do, or at least you can, but it's very difficult to intentionally do well. And I would have said things like it's just harder overall. I also would have said the simple, like the diversity of stuff you have access to is just smaller, which makes it less of like just a wacky toolbox, which Diablo 2 totally is, as much as I love Diablo 2. But some of the stuff you're talking about are things that I would not have remembered, just couldn't have remembered without going back and playing it.
But they do enforce your
memory. But they
memory
further
of it.
bolster the emotional memory of the thing.
It has the Dark Souls loop a little bit, where you go down 2 levels into the dungeon, you have like 6 potions on you because you can't afford anything more than that, right? Like you're so resource limited in a way that like with modern RPGs you just basically never are.
Yeah.
You get down into the dungeon, you start to like use your potions, you're running low, you have to sit there and make a choice. Am I going to try and run back up? I might die on the way back. Do I spend the 1 town portal that I have? Like you're so resource limited. And like Diablo 3 doesn't even have health. I mean, it has health potions, but your health always just regenerates in the background, so you basically don't need them other than for boss fights. Looking at the difference between how difficult and all the choices you have to make at every like in every second that you're playing that game versus now, which is just the choice you're making is a skill tree decision or something like that. You know, like Diablo 1 basically doesn't have that stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't care. Like it's much more interesting in the moment to worry about these kind of like dynamic, sort of emergent problems, you know, versus just like how am I going to build my character and like do I have cool shoulder pads, you know, like that stuff. Just I don't know.
It's
in
interesting
retrospect,
that when you think about it, the natural sort of inertia of any video game series, like any video game series, I would say even including probably, and I can't actually declare this with Dark Souls, but I'd be curious to hear if you agree in the case of Dark Souls. But I'm just saying in pretty much any series is to smooth out rough edges to make the game more accessible. No matter how hardcore a series is, sequels will almost always, I'm sure there are exceptions, but the natural tendency is towards smoothing that stuff out.
Yep.
In part, probably because the original game that has the weird roughness and challenge is probably a combination of intentional challenge and unintentional challenge because the designers just hadn't done this enough to know what they even can smooth out.
You can't see the game from the outside until you ship it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so when they're making Diablo 2, even if they had very similar intentions, it's really hard to maintain that stuff because you're like, well, some of this stuff was hard on purpose and we're going to make it less hard, but some of the stuff we didn't even intend to make like that.
This might be a little bit of a stretch, but I think you can kind of see the same phenomenon in film where an original film that is made on a $20 million budget, or I guess back in the day like a $2 million budget or something, and then they're handed 10 times that for the sequel, and it's just like not having the stress of having to worry about those constraints always ends up with something.
I think that's true, and I think that is a thing that you see happening in games. But the thing that makes a game sequel different than a film sequel, and where I think it's sometimes maybe more lamentable even that you can smooth things out in a game is like if you're making Diablo 1 and then you make Diablo 2, you don't have the time to see how the game can age and how people are really playing your game.
That's a good point.
Like that can happen in a movie, I guess, where like making a sequel to something after you see how it's appreciated in time, but it's different in it. Like the way that like it seems like people. I don't know exactly how.
No,
you know what I mean, right?
People can essentially treat your game as a tool that they are using in a way that that's a crass way of putting it. But they can literally discover a different way to play it.
Yeah,
even if it's a subtle difference that you did not, which is just
like the health potions to a health recharge thing from Diablo 1 to Diablo 2. I wonder if that same choice would have been made had they.
I think it's Diablo 2 doesn't have that, right? It was Diablo 3 has the.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
But
okay.
But sure.
But it's still.
My analogy does not hold if it's 3 because 3 came out years later. People knew how people played Diablo 1 and 2 by the time they played 3, and they made that a very deliberate choice. Sorry, when you said 2, and I didn't remember that either, but I.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But there was a lot smoothed over in 2 for sure.
I wonder.
You're right,
point
though.
Still stands.
Like I think your point does still stand, especially since Diablo 1 was made in an era before like Let's Play videos and like all the other things that would have created this like meta community awareness.
It's obviously also complicated by it being Blizzard, a company that wants more and more people to play their game every time, and they deliberately kind of want to smooth it out, but it seems like
they also probably got a bunch of letters and stuff saying your game is really hard. And didn't hear from the people who
were like, I fucking love how hardcore it is. And
I'm sure they're from some of those people, but just the way that feedback works, you always get more of the negative than the positive.
What do you think? What do you think about the Souls series in regards to that? Because that is a series that does, from the outside, seems like it does smooth itself out, but it also seems like they try very hard to keep those games really hard because the feedback loop on how people are really playing those games feels like it's tighter than it was on Diablo.
They've got the thing where it's like they're the generation, the people who are working on Dark Souls, like probably grew up playing much tougher games, and so now instead of the inadvertently, we're just making the coolest thing we can, and it happens to be easy or it happens to be hard based on our design philosophy. The Dark Souls, like they know what they're doing probably because it's informed by intentional.
I think it still has to be
backwards.
difficult, but I think in general, I think you're right. Like the philosophy behind those games seems to be hold on to as much of this stuff as possible because it's what makes this thing actually.
And people
good.
still get annoyed that Dark Souls 3 is
that's what I was
way
going to say.
smoother
Dark Souls
than
3
1.
is a very recent example of how even if you budge just this much, people are starting to push back. Right, where like you can move now while you're healing, and that's like a big change that people don't necessarily like.
Yeah.
I like it. But that's like I liked it before I played.
Right.
I didn't play Demon Souls and then Dark
Yeah.
Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2.
Yeah.
I like it because I played Dark Souls 3 first. But I'm sure if I had played them in the correct order, I would feel the exact same way as people. And so, and I think in retrospect, maybe what I really want to do after playing through the early Souls games is to play through 3 again, and see how my opinion of that has changed.
So here's a hypothesis about one of the things that enforces this progression. So you're making a game, you make a sequel.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to literally just make new levels for
Right.
the exact game you have, right? I mean, there are series that have done stuff not far from that, but that is not what a designer wants to do, right? And so you want to make something that actually really evolves what you've done. It's really, 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 really hard in game design to make a change that is flatly neutral.
Yep.
It is really hard to make a change that is just interestingly different, but doesn't change the dynamic in a way that like affects the challenge curve or anything else. Like almost any change you make is going to have some like qualitative impact on people's ability to play the game one way or another, even if it's small. And in a series like Dark Souls, that is amplified because people play these games in a hyper attentive way because the game requires you to. So any minute difference is going to be amplified more than it is in another game series, like like Diablo, for instance, which increasingly you can basically just like tiptoe, like sort of waltz through, with sort of spamming everything. I don't know if that's still true in the latest Diablo 3 update. So whatever if I'm wrong about that now, but that's certainly how it felt playing that game when it came out. And so then, like, confronted with that reality, it's got to be really hard to justify making a change that is potentially going to reduce the size of your audience.
Oh, yeah.
Because it makes the thing less sort of, like, more, like, if it pushes players away more, even an audience that is already accustomed and, like, desirous of challenge, how do you know what their breaking point is? Like, how do you know if, like, maybe you like the amount of challenge you have is like just as much as people will swallow. I mean, that I'm obviously exaggerating, right? Like it's probably never going to be that like exact hair trigger, but it's always going to be a like much harder thing to justify and do to make something that could potentially make your game more exclusionary, even if the series affection for the series was built on it being really difficult.
I mean, you always look for that like play test where how like what's the average time that people bounced off of this thing, right?
Yeah.
I bought Dark Souls 1 and I bought Bloodborne, and I think I played 30 minutes of each and bounced off of them faster than I've ever bounced off a game in my life.
That's what happened to me with the original Demon Souls before I went back and got back into it.
Yeah. But you have to admire the fact that that's just what they're doing. And I think typically with a game like this, even like especially with something like Diablo, right? I think they doubled down on, if you look at 2 and 3, on like hardcore mode and sort of giving you the options to opt into that stuff, right? Which I guess is fine, but I do think that.
But it's definitely it's doing it through inorganic means.
Exactly, I was going to say it's different. It's a different situation than
Diablo's challenging.
The mechanics.
Diablo's challenging
a very
because
different thing than just adding like
everything
more
in the
damage
game,
to the monsters or
right,
whatever. Right?
Exactly right. Everything in the game in Diablo is what contributes to make it really hard, as opposed to just more hit points. You need to stay alive longer. Yeah. What was I just going to say? Oh, yeah, the bounce off thing. That is something that, I think, furthers these dynamics we're talking about, because back when Diablo 1, for instance, came out, if you bounced off a game in 30 minutes, you will probably bounce right back into it a day later or a week later, because you don't have infinite games because there aren't infinite games.
Right.
Like the number of games that exist in the world is lower, and also your instantaneous access to them basically doesn't exist because you have to go to a store to buy the thing. It's probably more expensive than it is now. Like games were still $50 or $60, but it costs more than $50 or $60 now does.
Also,
due
there was
to
just
inflation.
nothing like a Diablo, right? So even if it
you didn't
really
have a ton of
difficult,
options.
It was probably still satisfying enough just to be in that town
Right. If the
that you would just
tone-
kind of
yeah.
figure out how to play it after a long time of
It's funny. I remember
That's what happened to me with Diablo 1.
I remember Demon Souls got the pickup that it did, at least in my brain, because instead of, like, that's true that people were bouncing off it or people just didn't even know about it and it was getting lost in the noise, but Demon's Souls was a game that it felt like people who write about games were just yelling about it for weeks. And it was a different tone than I was used to for that, though, where I remember just like, I remember it was Lee Alexander on Twitter, I think, who just like basically every other day for 2 weeks just said, if you're not playing Demon's Souls, you're an idiot because it's a hardcore, like, impossible game of the type that no one makes anymore. And if you lament that this sort of game doesn't exist and you're not playing Demon's Souls, I know that sounds dumb, but like, just please look at it, look at it, look at it. And like, it's rare that people actually...
I'm sure she was actually one of the people at the time who convinced me to play it because I was working at Gama Sutra.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which she also was at the time.
And like,
sometimes with those games, I mean, like I had a similar experience with Far Cry 2, for instance, where I bounced off of that game, and I had to be hammered over the head by you guys, I think, to play it. So yeah.
It's tough. It's I mean, it's really difficult to know when you're bouncing off because it's just not for you, and when you're bouncing off because you just need that one more like little push to discover that it totally is for you. That's really hard.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you played Diablo, and I'm glad you shared your experiences with it. That was really illuminating to me.
Yep. You guys want to take a break?
Yeah, let's take a break.
Sure.
Our last break of 2016.
This episode of Idle Thumbs is brought to you by Blue Apron. Blue Apron sends directly to your door all of the ingredients and recipes you need to put together a really delicious dinner meal.
A dinner meal?
Yes, several times a week. They have different plans you can sign up for that will send you sort of different configurations, whether it's for 2 people or a family of 4 or what have you. And you just have all the stuff in your kitchen and you make the meal. They're like generally very straightforward recipes, but across a wide variety of cuisines and sort of protein types. And there's vegetarian option if you prefer that.
You get a lot of stuff that you already know that you like, but then there's also a lot of surprising things that show up that are really fun to cook.
Yeah, exactly. Here are some examples of some of the December menus. Roasted pork and braised cabbage with barley and glazed apples, Thai green coconut curry with sweet potato and jasmine rice, and brown butter and chestnut gnocchi with Brussels sprouts and pea shoot salad. So that is like, those are 3 different things that are across like, a decent variety of cuisines, but like can all be basically cooked in one pan with all the stuff you get in the box from Blue Apron. And I have, through that kind of thing, I have ended up finding like a bunch of ingredients, like couscous I really like now. Not that I didn't like it before, but it didn't really ever occur to me to make it until I made it in a Blue Apron meal. And that set me off on this whole like Moroccan kick that I've gotten really into, and I'm really glad that I was just exposed to that in the kitchen as opposed to just like in a restaurant or something.
It's different when you prepare it yourself and figure out how it works.
Exactly.
Your internalization goes up, if you will.
So if you go
Nick, it's true.
If you go to blueapron.com/idle, that is blueapron.com/idle, you can get your first 3 meals free with free shipping included. So don't pass that up. blueapron.com/idle. Make a meal, make a few meals, make 3 meals. Exactly, that number, for free with free shipping at blueapron.com/idle.
Sweet.
This episode of Idle Thumbs is also brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is an incredibly fast, easy, convenient, user-friendly, responsive way to make your own website, portfolio, blog, or online store. Any kind of website you need, Squarespace can almost certainly make it. They have 24/7 customer service. You can get started without a credit card, get your whole website set up before you commit. And when you do, use the offer code THUMBS to get 10% off. And if you sign up for a year, you get a domain name thrown in there as well. So it is in one single transaction, you can have everything you need to get your whole website started up. I am going to use this opportunity to re-recommend a website created using the Thumbs offer code on Squarespace, pntgrm.com, home of the Senpai, the Seinfeld visual novel, the Seinfeld anime crossover visual novel that I thought was fantastic and is hosted on a really ridiculous looking website that was against all of Squarespace's
the shame of
intentions.
Squarespace. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like a 90s vintage
Just the
GeoCities or
trash,
something.
yeah.
But still perfectly responsive.
I know. I
works
love it.
on all your devices.
I love that website is just garbage, but it's also.
It's got a little menu that expands out when you click on it.
It's got that hamburger. It's got everything you could ever want. I don't know if it's a hamburger.
It's not a hamburger, but it's still a dynamic menu. And it was made on Squarespace with the Thumbs promo code for 10% off. And it's got a hilarious free Seinfeld game that you can play right there in your browser.
What's the URL again?
pntgrm.com. It's pentagram with no vowels.
It really shows the how far you can push Squarespace. And so what's the deal, Chris? What's the deal, Chris?
Squarespace.com.
What's the deal with Squarespace?
Well, let me tell you. 10% off your first order and sign up for a year, get a free domain name. You can get started without having to sign up or put any money down. Well, you have to sign up, but you don't have to put any money down. And then when you're ready, you get that 10% off with the offer code THUMBS. Everything you need.
What a deal.
It is absolutely a deal. That is the deal.
All
Nick.
right.
Oh, thanks.
Are we back?
Yeah, why not? We're back.
We're back. We never left.
Let's just be back right now.
We are back. Hey. Hey.
Yeah.
Hey.
We're not back, are we?
We are.
Oh.
Nikki Draycott writes, "Hey, Thumbs. I'm writing to tell you about a TV show here in the UK I've only recently found, despite being on its 3rd season. The show is called Time Commanders, and it's somewhere between a history program and a 3-versus-3 esport. The teams are not pro athletes.
Nick's response, he's like, yeah, okay. Huh? Esports?
Excuse me?
The teams are not athletes. They're members of the general public that apply to be on the show. The show uses the Total War series to recreate historical battles. There are 2 warm-up games followed by the main battle. Before, during, and after the battles, both the show host and on-hand historical experts set the scene, comment on the battle, and provide an after-battle report. In between battles, weapons and tactics are explained by experts via pre-filmed videos."
Is this show hosted by the people, by the hosts of 3 Moves Ahead? Because if it's not,
Yeah, they
fucking
missed their
should
chance.
be. Yeah, jeez.
I think because this show doesn't focus on the video game elements, it gets to be mature in its content, which is what makes it well worth a watch. I believe that because the teams aren't athletes, the video game element is more enjoyable, maybe even more relatable to an average person like me with a passion for video games.
Time Commanders?
Yes.
Huh.
For those interested, it airs at 9 p.m. Tuesdays on BBC4 in the UK. If you can find it, I recommend giving it a go and maybe even applying for Season 4.
Oh, I'll apply.
Nick, you got to be a Time Commander.
Keep podding those casts, Nick. Well, I mean, in the tradition of like every single British show, surely this will just get adapted. Except it'll get adapted and they'll use Call of Duty.
Oh, the American version would be weird.
Yeah, they would use the Call of Duty series, and it would be explicitly sponsored by Activision, and it would be miserable.
Colbert isn't using those CG
And they would
eagles
hire
to wipe
they would
to do
hire
screen
like
wipes anymore.
a B-tier comedian probably to host it. I'm just imagining what it would be.
They could hire us to host it though.
That's true, or they could hire
Idle
could
Thumbs
hire
network stars.
Rob and Andrew
Yeah.
of Esports Today. I guess it could be an Esports Today 3 Moves Ahead collaboration.
Yeah.
Yeah. Time Commanders US. How do they call it Time Commanders? That does not sound like that sounds like
They go through time, through history, and then they're commanders because they're playing a video game.
I get the connection. It's just when you combine those things, it sounds like an arcade game. It sounds like Time Crisis or something.
It is.
There's this cool shield though with
oh my
Time
god, it
Commanders
looks like
on
that
I mean,
too.
It's a cool yeah.
That is a British television
Oh yeah,
logo
no,
for
it's
sure.
Solidly
How much sort of weird, gross gold texture and fog can you have on there? That looks like something from it looks like Brass Eye.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I'm glad to know about this. We should find some clips.
Yeah.
Because it could be as described. It could have so many different executions of that idea.
Hopefully,
a show.
Hopefully the aesthetic is really nice. Hopefully, like as people win and lose, it's like basically narrated by Great British Bake Off people. Where it's
Oh
like,
man, yeah.
his army has retreated.
That was a nice maneuver.
Yeah.
That was nice play.
What, Nick? There was a show?
Oh, there was a show when the original Total War, not the original Total War, but Rome, the first 3D Total War came out. There was a History Channel show that used footage of like Rome battles and stuff like in the game engine. And then just whatever. It was like, other than that, it was just a typical History Channel show about. Yeah.
That was essentially B-roll. I can't even remember.
Yeah, it was basically just B-roll. Yeah. But they were just like, oh, using this advanced computer simulation.
They didn't acknowledge what the source was.
Yeah. They were just like using our most powerful PS2 supercomputers. We've simulated every agent, every historical agent in the computer, and it's just like. Stupid guys flying everywhere. Anyway,
that's what makes me wonder about the execution of this show as well, because I think in the back of my mind I had that History Channel thing in there and I didn't remember, because my initial assumption was just like, I wonder if they even acknowledge that it's Total War, that it's like a commercial product that you can just buy for $50 on
Strap
Steam.
in, time commanders. Let's go back to history history where you are the generals.
Right. Yeah.
I guess the American version of that could also be a daytime Nickelodeon game show.
It would be Nick Arcade,
kids.
right?
Yeah. Well, they have that as well on the BBC right now. There's a weird BBC video game show where people like play Super Mario Brothers and stuff. It's They got a lot of weird stuff on the Beeb.
Well, thanks, Nikki. Dustin Keehan writes, "Hey Thumbs, recently you guys have talked about lo-fi or no-fi game development, and we're trying to think of good examples of it. You should take a look at Pure Solar and the Great Architects, a game that started development for the Sega Genesis in 2004 and was released as a playable cartridge in 2010. I think this is one of the best examples of lo-fi game development, although there are other things similar to this, like the game Retro City Rampage, which came out of the developer's attempt to recreate Grand Theft Auto 3 on the original NES and was originally called Grand Theftendo. I can't remember more right now, but I'm sure there are similar projects out there where the developers purposely limit themselves to making a game that can fit and play on an older system. Thanks for all the great pods and streams, for the hours of entertainment each week."
I think that's a very different definition of lo-fi game development than where this conversation thread started, because it started off more like equivalence to people just taping themselves and it becoming a band that you record, whereas that is like those examples of spending a decade on a Sega Genesis cartridge that can run on hardware, or like Grand Theftendo. That feels
Is it like shooting a movie on Super 8 or something?
Yeah, it feels almost like we're going to record a film score that sounds like a 60s James Bond score, and to do that, we're actually going to engineer it so that like we're miking the entire orchestra at once. We're not cordoning anything off. We're going to do it in like that. That feels more like that almost, where it's
an even more extreme example, like we're going to record this.
We've built an Edison wax cylinder.
Actual historical instruments, like viols rather than modern violins or violas, and
which is its own total other interesting excavation of history. And like,
I mean, the thing that is weird, the different about this kind of is that even using historical recording techniques, you have to go back pretty far before you get to stuff that actually sounds lo-fi. People have been making recordings sound really, really, really good for it's not as whereas in games you go back only a few years and suddenly it looks like this is primitive looking. It doesn't you have to go a lot further back in maybe eventually games will be like that. Maybe 100 years from now or 50 years from now or even 10 years from now, games will visually change at a less extreme rate than they currently do. Yeah. That is an interesting example, though. Because of this email, I saw this email a few days ago, actually, when I was filtering through some of this stuff, and I looked it up, and there's actually a version of it called Pure Solar and the Architects HD, which you can just get on Steam or wherever else, and it's like a fully, there's no technical visual limitations at all, and apparently it's just like a somewhat mediocre RPG. At least that's the overall sense I got from reading reviews and reactions. So I don't know if I'm necessarily interested in it as a play experience, but it is a really fascinating story because when you find it was actually difficult to find a lot of information about the Genesis version because the thing they're focusing on now is selling the actual modern version that human beings can actually buy for a modern system. But the Genesis version is fascinating. I saw a Let's Play of it, and it really does look like something out of time. It's weird knowing that this was released in 2010 for a system that probably hasn't been sold commercially for 20 years.
Right.
I don't know when they stopped selling Genesis. Probably about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe a little later.
96.
Yeah.
That's got to be towards the end of the Genesis' life.
Yeah. I remember
the Genesis 2 and 3 were out at that point. Those little tiny ones.
Oh right, I forgot about those. Yeah, weird.
Wait, what?
They
there
made
were
like die
revisions
shrink
to
versions of the Genesis hardware, so you could buy. It's like they also made an NES 2 and an SNES 2, which were just
the weird top loading
NES,
tiny NES.
Yeah, I had those for a while. I had an NES. And SNES 2, and I had a Genesis 3 in college. I think I like because those were actually surprisingly easy to get at like Funko Lands and stuff in the mid 2000s because people
that's
were
the only NES
trading
I've
those
ever
in to
had.
get 3D consoles.
Because I never had an NES when it was a current thing, and when I was living in my old apartment where we used to record Idle Thumbs, I bought an NES 2 on eBay, and that's when I played all of the NES stuff that I've really ever played pretty much. And actually, I didn't bring this up when you were talking about Diablo, but that's when I had my experience of playing the original Legend of Zelda, which I've talked about before on the podcast, so it's not worth going into huge detail, but I had the total same experience.
Well, you know what's
where
interesting?
I was like, the tone of this game is amazing.
I remembered you talking about that, and while I was streaming it, I was just talking generally about basically the same shit I just talked about, but somebody was like, "Oh, I had this exact same experience playing the original Legend of Zelda. Like, it totally blew me away. I didn't think it would be that good." It's like, "Oh yeah, Chris did the same thing. Yeah. It's man, I want an NES Classic." Which is weird because I don't.
Jake just got one of those.
Oh, did you?
As a gift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ben, I want that dumb thing.
Ben Burbank, who's a programmer at Campo Santo, he said he heard that it was available on Amazon Prime now, and it was only up for like 5 minutes. So he pressed the button, and then someone just drove it to our office within the hour.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Oh my
that
God.
was hardcore.
What outputs does that thing have?
It's HDMI, right?
It's HDMI.
That's cool. That's what I would hope. But
yeah. It's
got that classic wired controller.
Yep,
that's what I want.
It's funny
that's the reason I want
it. The NES Classic, I looked at the plug that the wired controller uses, and I'm like, this thing is hideous looking. What is this plug? It's the plug that you for the extending a Wiimote, like plugging the analog stick into the bottom of your Wii remote.
Oh yeah.
Which also, I guess, means that you can plug an NES controller into a Wii remote.
You can. Yeah. It's weird.
Yeah, I was like, what is this port? This is a total non-standard port. Oh, it's
that is
Nintendo's...
such a classic weird sideways Nintendo thing.
Yeah, of course.
That is only like a tiny percentage of their audience is ever going to do.
Yep.
And if they just made a fucking enough of them and did it right, people would love it.
I mean, does that mean that you could then use the NES controller from the NES Classic to play Virtual Console NES
I believe
games?
so, yeah.
That's really cool. Like,
See,
that's
this is like
really
a
good.
secret thing.
Yeah.
That I guess
you can
it's
plug
too
your
late at this
Wavebird
point
into your
the Wii U
Wii.
is basically a dying system.
And, man, I hope the Switch doesn't use that port for anything.
I doubt
it probably won't.
I doubt it does.
On the back, players will notice there are 4 ports on the back. It says Nintendo
Each
Direct.
one a different shape. What could it mean? Nintendo.
Yeah.
Have people streamed that from that thing? I guess there's no point because you have emulators.
Probably, but it's just a Nintendo.
Cool
I
device.
haven't even plugged mine in yet.
Yeah.
I was so excited for that thing to come out that I bought 2 wireless controllers from some vendor, like that I knew would arrive like a couple days after I got my NES Classic in quotes, before I knew that there were going to be like 3 available on Amazon. So now, Anyway, I have one now. Take that.
Cool.
Thanks, Ben Burbank. Thanks, Internet.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Nintendo.
Nathan Jester writes, "You're mentioning the lack of comedy in modern games. I think you missed a few important games, though. The Deponia, Mario & Luigi, Luigi's Mansion, Borderlands, and Paper Mario series make a point of being funny throughout and generally succeed. These games are longer and full of dialogue, and with the exception of Luigi's Mansion, have a long plot and large cast of characters. So I don't have a huge point to make here, but I think there are a few modern games that sell themselves on comedy. That's all. Bye." Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that's probably less true for something like Borderlands than of like the Mario and Luigi games, for instance. But I could maybe it's just because Borderlands didn't work for me personally.
I don't know. I think it's at least the second thing that people mention when they talk about
I would say it's
Borderlands.
the second thing, but But like the Mario and Luigi games, like Borderlands is like a full service, like first person action RPG thing.
The thing that's
right?
different about like it's one of its differentiators though is that it has
Mm-hmm.
a sense of humor inside of it.
Right, that's true. I guess that just still is different than like a comedy film in which the comedy isn't a differentiator. It is literally the entire reason for the existence of the thing. At least in a movie that is just a straight out comedy, usually. I guess I'm making a sort of I guess there's no real point to make that distinction. I mean, there are good examples in there. I haven't played any of the recent like Nintendo wacky RPGs.
I haven't either. I was really into the first couple Mario and Luigi's. Was that on the GBA that those were available for?
Yeah, I think GBA then DS.
Yeah,
sounds right to me. Does that?
I don't know.
I think I that is true because my GBA Lite or whatever the little tiny Game Boy Advance was that just looks like an NES controller still has Mario and Luigi in it, and I play an hour of it every 2 years and am baffled by it.
Right. Yeah, those games were fun. I mean, the reason those games I think seem a little easier to describe as straight up comedy games is because they have like obviously they're full featured RPGs in a certain sense, but also how much of your brain needs. This is, I guess, what is different to me about Borderlands versus Mario and Luigi. Not that anyone needs to fucking distinguish.
Thank God we're having a conversation that is differentiating between Mario and Luigi and Borderlands.
Like, if you play Borderlands,
the definitive opinion.
I feel like the majority of what you're thinking about, certainly if you're playing it co-op, is like all the action stuff that's going on and the guns you're picking up and all the like the shit that's going on. Whereas in Mario and Luigi, like the gameplay really just does not ask enough of you that it actually sort of not overwhelms, but like fully takes control of your attention in that way. At least that wasn't my experience. You can kind of just like sort of like amble through those games as like funny stuff happens. And
there's probably a version of Borderlands where the comedy gets itself into the mechanical moments as well, but it would be very hard to do. And like, man, an example of a company that I think tried to do that and didn't, and I only know of it because LucasArts published it, was when Planet Moon made that game Armed and Dangerous.
Oh, yeah,
that game tried very much to be you're either a first or third person character in these arenas full of enemies, but like your guns do like weird gravity wells, or like a shark pops up out of the earth and eats them, or like you can affix sticky mines to people, like enemies will run into each other and then like form like enemy Katamaris and stuff. Like they tried very much to make it like balls to the wall action, but the things that you're doing produce goofy results. I just don't think that game held together at all.
Planet Moon did that like with that other game, Giants.
The
people knew that for
Giants had that
wacky.
feeling. It felt like even MDK2 was getting into that, which was Shiny, but I know Planet Moon was an offshoot of Shiny.
Earthworm Jim
of those Earthworm Jim people.
Well, Earthworm Jim was more just like it's a very
Earthworm Jim was a wacky cartoon platformer
with like goofy animations and jokes.
Borderlands would be a bad game if it tried to do that stuff, but that's when I think of like the Borderlands sensibility then translated into the gunplay mechanics. I end up like my brain just basically instantly magnetizes to Armed and Dangerous because I think it's one of the only ones that really tried.
It almost never. I mean, it just almost never works, right? Like there was that game. No one's gonna remember this because no one cared about this game, but there was this game that was like about a game character. And the conceit was like this game character's been
he was like a fake Duke Nukem, right?
Yeah, it's like this is like he's had a whole series, but the series has like declined over the years.
Yeah, I can't remember what
and now this game is like his attempt is return to relevance, and the idea was that it's like a hilarious satire. It was bad, and no one is going to remember this game. But like it just when you try and like make the conceit like a funny conceit of your game that is like informing all the gameplay, it is so hard to make that good and not just painful.
I'm a big dummy for not remembering what this is called, but it could, well, maybe not. I feel like we collectively only played it for a couple of weeks when it came out, but it was a first-person shooter. Man, maybe it was third-person. Shit. It was just within the last few years. Super arcadey, where like everything that you shot had huge scores that came up on screen. And it was like a lot of sort of gunplay rack-up combo points.
Was it the Epic game? Was it the?
I feel like Bulletstorm. It was just Bulletstorm. Like,
Bulletstorm.
It feels like Bulletstorm is another like you could push that a tiny bit farther and get goofy with it. I feel like, but
I think they kind of did, but in a way that was like off-putting. You know what I mean? Like you could probably make a game that felt like that mechanically and was less just like, bleh, bleh, you know. I don't know how to describe. Like, I don't remember the game well enough to like be really specific in my descriptions. I just the what trailer?
The Mummy trailer.
Less like the Mummy trailer is what you're describing.
Yeah, that no one has paired, at least in my opinion, has paired the sense of humor that would pair with that mechanics, but is kind of healthy and fun with that set of mechanics. It always seems to either the comedy is just not related to the gunplay stuff, or it's just kind of sickening when you try to make that stuff funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, we haven't. I guess Portal probably falls into this discussion a little bit. I mean, it's not like an out and out.
Well, I think we mentioned. I think we actually mentioned
that
Portal
earlier?
because
Portal
Portal's an example of a game
Okay.
where I brought up Portal actually. I think because, or if I didn't, I was remiss in not doing so because that was the point I was trying to make, that like so much of comedy is timing. And in a game where it's just narration that is 100% authored and does not require you to like participate in a dialogue tree or something, like GLaDOS's lines can just be straight up delivered. I mean, they can respond to things you're doing in the world in coarse terms, but like that game is just, the narrative of that game is just authored 100%.
They talked about that. It might have been
in
in the final days of Portal 2, which was that article.
Oh, yeah.
That article / like ebook
feature. Yeah.
I believe that's where they talked about that. I think about Chet and Eric sitting in there, like using their stupid Fox Pro spreadsheet or whatever the insane old ass tool is that those guys use to do dialogue stuff, but just in isolation, just adjusting values to the millisecond of the timing of GLaDOS lines versus player events. Because you can in that situation, you can you can go in and
she's omnipresent.
Yeah,
like she doesn't have a physical presence really.
I love that voice in Valve games was authored in Fox Pro for a while. Oh, that was in.
I don't remember what Fox Pro is.
Fox Pro is like an old database spreadsheet program, like for DOS and Windows 3.1. But those guys apparently. Oh, that was in Elon Ruskin's GDC talk about the Valve dialogue system. I think he said part of his talk was give your developers the tool that they want to use, and in this case, those guys wanted to use Fox Pro.
Well, fair enough.
Because that was a program that they had used in the past and knew, and it was what they
were pros.
Because they're pro foxes, and anyway.
It led the return of Matt Hazard.
Matt Hazard.
There
I kept thinking
is.
Max or something.
Yeah, I was thinking Max too. Yeah.
That'd
Will
be,
Arnett voicing the lead
Of course.
character.
Of course.
Yep.
I mean, whatever, he's fine, but that's just you
That's
just
exactly-
know that's going to be a bad
exactly what
choice.
you'd get, yeah.
Yep.
Well.
Astrom writes on Senpai and dating sims. Dear Idle Thumbs, in a recent podcast you mentioned the Senpai dating game, as well as on this podcast, and you had a rather awkward description of what a senpai is. Senpai is a term used to signify your superior, though not necessarily teacher, i.e. students a year higher than you in school are senpai, professional sports people are senpai, with respect to that sport, etc. Senpai noticed me comes from fangirls and fanboys who see their attempts to reach their senpai or activities in the same interest acknowledged by said senpai. For example, I'm really into rock climbing, and an Instagram video of me climbing was liked by a super famous French climber. It's not about purposeful ignorance beforehand per se, although that of course does increase the high afterwards. Extend this to weird dating stuff and you can see where it might go. On Hatoful Boyfriend, it seems like a bizarre dating sim, but once you really delve in and explore all the possibilities and endings, you'll find there's a deeper and really dark and sad story in this game. Huh. Loving the show, keep up the good work, Sang Jae. I didn't play enough Hatoful Boyfriend to get to the
Sad
dark
metal-ear,
and sad story.
Yeah, I feel like that was a game that both you and I think Sean were really excited about playing, and then bounced off.
Yeah,
instantly.
I did. I played it with Sarah actually because we'd both just seen a bunch of crap about it on the internet, and it was like kind of funny for a while. And then eventually, I'm just like, I don't think I care enough about this to keep going. But I'm glad that there's some weird like secret darkness contained in it.
Yeah.
For the people who did play it more. Well, we should probably wrap it up. This is a short podcast, but this is our second in a row today.
For a long year.
And I am exhausted.
Yeah.
Oh, here's actually a really quick thing that I can just throw in here in response to something Jake was talking about a few weeks ago. Owen Goss writes, I was listening to episode 290 and Jake's discussion of Google Earth VR. I think it's one of the best experiences I've had in VR. The first time I tried it, I was standing alone in my home office in my Vive, repeatedly yelling, "Oh my God." It's good stuff. Jake, I'm not sure if you found this option or not, but if you select the little 3 dots button in the top right of the in-app menu, you enable human scale. This enables you to fly right down to what appears to be very close to 1-to-1 scale. It's clear that the reason they haven't enabled this by default, because you suddenly see how blocky all the geometry and textures are, but it makes for some amazing experiences. There's something very strange about standing in front of your own house in VR, but where everything on your street is a lo-fi, dreamlike version of reality. Lo-fi gaming, guys, oh man.
Oh, shit.
All comes together. It's also fun to stand yourself atop of a skyscraper or fly up the side of a mountain. It's really amazing. Love the show. Keep casting pods and fishing rods and other things one might cast. Owen, milk bag of games.
Milk bag.
That's cool. I think we had mentioned the notion of that, or you had mentioned the notion of that, but that it wasn't.
I'd never been able to find it.
Yeah, well, there you go.
The thing that, like, the default where you're just an ultimate giant Godzilla scale, the thing that I was really enjoying was then just basically putting my head down on the ground and looking at it from, like, as if the world is a scale model and you're able to just peer into it. But getting that lo-fi street level is also pretty good.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I guess that's it. Oh, here's one. Jody Winterbottom writes, "Hi, Chris. I hope you're well. I'm working with San Miguel to help create the San Miguel Rich List for 2017.
What?
This list is made up of people rich with life experience as a juxtaposition to the traditional rich list based on material wealth."
What?
What?
Congrats, Chris.
Thanks. I made the rich list, you guys. I don't know what that means.
It means you are rich. It means that you
God,
bought
I
that
wish.
$500
I wish it meant I'm
iOS
rich.
app.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. God, do you remember that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You have a picture of a diamond on your phone, so everyone knows you are rich.
Yeah.
You are on richlist.app.
I'm rich, you guys. Call me Rich.
That's my dad's name.
That's true. That's your middle name.
That's true. I'm on the rich list. Rich is in the list of names that constitute my entire name.
It's true.
Call it the rich list.
Thanks, Rich. Thanks, Nick.
You're welcome.
Thanks to everyone listening or watching this podcast.
Thanks, Rich. Thanks, Jasper.
Oh, man. Yeah, I missed that trick.
Jasper.com/idlethumbs.
If you...
What? Oh, that's for your Jasper
That's
mattress?
fine for my Jasper. Yeah, you get your $50 off.
Off your Jasper.
Yeah.
There's a
Off your
big
Jesper.
apartment building here in town called the Jasper.
Oh, I know. I drove by it and I
Yeah.
saw Jasper.
Yeah.
Hey,
It's where you live.
Prius. Hey, Jasper.
We're finishing. Going out strong. Going out so strong.
If you would like to write us email about any of this crap or anything else, you can do so
Please, something else.
at questions@idlethumbs.net. If you like this podcast, please, please, please consider telling a friend, recommending it, where you talk about games on the internet or anywhere else. We can be found on Twitter @idlethumbs, on Facebook at facebook.com/idlethumbs. Our YouTube channel that has this podcast as well as all the other streams we do can be found at youtube.com/idlevideos. Our Twitch channel is twitch.tv/idlethumbs, and as we get into the new year, we'll get back into the streaming schedule. Haven't been streaming in the last week, I imagine, because of holiday travel. But thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We will be back next week.
That's true.
Bye.
Bye. Goodbye. Ba, 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 ba.